We are live. Okay. Hi everyone. We are live, and it's so good to see this. We've waited for this. We've prayed for this. We've planned for this. It's super exciting to see that we're live. So let me just take a minute to reach out to everyone that we are live so that more people can join us this evening or morning. Hi Bumi. Bumi is here with me. Hi. Hi Bumi. Okay, just give me a minute. Let me reach out to everyone in my circle that we are live. So I'm gonna be muted. Okay, I'm back. Hi everyone, welcome again. Hi Bumi. My darling husband is here. Nice to see you. So I'm going live with Bumi now. Because this evening or morning or whatever time it is at your end. Okay. Yay! Hi, Bumi.
Okay, I was trying
Oh my
to make sure
God.
I had the camera set up right.
Okay. Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine. That's okay. Hi, nice to see you. Nice to have
I
you.
know. Oh, finally we took it out of the group chat. So
Yes,
one
we
of
took it out of the
the
group chat, like we took
private
it out of the
messages.
DMs.
So we're actually seeing each other now.
Here we are. So good to see you,
You
sis.
too. How are
Oh,
you?
I'm doing really well today, as you can see.
Yeah, you look beautiful. I love your
Oh,
earrings.
thank you. Thank you so much. You look so
Oh,
good too. Thank
thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Oh my God.
Thank you for reaching out to me. Thank you for inviting me here. It's honestly like just such a pleasure to be here.
Oh my
So,
God. It was just so beautiful of you and quite gracious, I must say. When I reached out to you and your response was so quick.
oh,
It was just so
thank
beautiful.
you.
It was cool, like this, my
I know
sis.
when you sent me the message on I think you had said something on one of my comments because sometimes I miss the
Yeah, you do.
direct messaging. So whenever I see it in my comments, then I go check because if there's,
Okay.
you know how sometimes you can get lost if your
Of
inbox is full. I
course.
never check my messages.
Yeah, I get
So
it.
I'm glad it wasn't lost and we were able to
Yeah,
make
I'm
it
glad. I'm
happen.
glad to. I'm glad we have this eventually.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this is so good, and I'm super excited for what we have ahead of us, for the
Yes.
beautiful conversation we're gonna have this evening. I'm super excited. I mean, I remember when I came across your page for the first time, it was like, oh, this is my girl. Like, no, she sees marriage the way I see marriage. Like this my sister.
Awesome.
That kind of thing. That was absolutely when I saw your page. I think it
Uh,
was the home she built, or I found your personal page first. I can't remember which came first,
okay.
but that was the vibe for me. Like, yeah, this is my Christian girl
Mhm.
who sees marriage the same way I see marriage, and that's just
Yes.
so beautiful. That's so precious.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
it's so
Thank you.
precious.
I'm glad we have the
Mm,
same vision. I feel like we need more people like
yeah,
just, having a public platform where like young girls can see that this is possible. This is the reality. Because, when you have the opposite side, and they have the bigger audience, like
yeah.
young girls are very
It's
impressionable. So they're like, and then they envision like, oh, this is what life is supposed to look like when really it's not. So,
It's not. So we need to really speak about this more and let people see this more. So we need to
hmm
come out. We need to go public about it.
hmm
That's the honest truth, and
hmm
that's why we're doing what we're doing. Right.
absolutely. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Oh, so good, so good. Okay.
So,
I think we can
so
just.
do you have like like run me through like what to expect through this conversation? So, are we going to like just are you gonna ask me a few
Well,
questions?
it's going to be more of a conversation and not really an interview. So that's
Okay.
the idea behind this. It's not an interview. I'm not really throwing questions,
Okay.
although there will be questions because questions will help us get the direction of the conversation right.
Absolutely.
So there will be
Yes.
questions, but it's not going to be like I ask you, you answer. No, it's going to
Okay.
be a conversation. We're rubbing
Okay.
minds. So people are watching, and of course, everyone online, everyone watching and tuning in can also get to ask their questions. So they can put in their
Mm-hmm.
questions. We'll talk about it. We'll discuss it.
Mm-hmm.
Just a
Mm-hmm.
platform for everyone to just be good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yes.
that's it.
Absolutely.
That's
I
how
love
it's
that.
gonna work.
I love
All right. So yeah, I
that.
think we can go straight into this,
Okay.
shall we? Okay. Good. We're ready. Ready. Ready.
Ready.
All right. So good. Okay. So now I just want us to begin from the part of the home she built. I'm running with I am Beyula, and let me just go back to the story for me, how it all started for me. Okay, so I'm by the way, I'm just 7 months married. It's not even up to 7 months, just 6 months and some days married. And
Oh,
yeah, so
congratulations again.
thank you. So for me, it was just like I knew that there's something so beautiful about marriage. I knew there's something absolutely godly about marriage, and
Mm-hmm.
it's now seeming like because in this particular time, I'm a Gen Z. Why, by the way, I believe you're Gen Z as well. So in this
Mm-hmm.
particular time that we are, we are this set of women who want to thrive on our jobs, our careers, in our finances. We just want to be that big corporate girl or that big businesswoman. You just want to get things
Mm-hmm.
done. And it seems like while we are going out there to achieve all this, we are leaving our home fronts behind.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this kind of people who see marriage as something that is tying them down from becoming all that they want to become. They see marriage as a necessary evil. It's just something that I just have to do, just be with somebody, have a kid. So it seems like in this time and in this age, women are not running with the vision of really going all out to fulfill God's purposes in their marriages.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see? So
Yeah.
that for me was how the story of I Am Baby last started, and of course there were other behind the scenes, interactions with God.
Yes.
So
Yes.
literally to God to make me start this.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's the background story. I feel like for women in my generation, for wives in my generation, we need to renew her mind concerning what we think about marriage. Marriage is not this necessary evil where we just want to be with somebody because we just want to have a child and we don't want it to be out of wedlock.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's something
Absolutely.
about marriage that
Yeah.
is godly and we still need to pursue. And it seems like this is something that the older generation knew. It's something the older generation were very active about pursuing. But
Mm-hmm.
now in this time, it's like we are watering it down. So that
Yeah.
was it for me. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to know for you as well, the home she built, or, how did you get the vision and
Mm-hmm.
how has it been and how is it going?
I think the home she builds, it started for me after I became a stay-at-home mom.
Okay.
Because, well, I was working when I first got married, and so the question of when I first got married, it was really close to the time I had just rededicated my life to the Lord, and so there was a lot of question about purpose and like, okay, Lord, like this is the direction that you're leading me in, so like, what am I supposed to be doing in this season? And then really after I had my baby, and I became a stay-at-home mom. Of course, I got to spend more time with the Lord. And, usually when you're in that place where you're not really doing much, all you're doing is just like, the mundane things, like you're doing laundry, you're doing cooking,
Yeah.
like, and every day. And so I think the Lord started to place on my heart, like, just having a real, like a real love for what I do, because sometimes we can
Yeah.
get very, I think the word is complacent. Like we can get very like, oh, there's no real
Mm-hmm.
value in just being a mom and a wife.
Mm-hmm.
But then
Mm-hmm.
like I started praying intentionally about it, and the Lord just started to reveal to me, because I started to talk to like other women who were much older than me, more experienced. And when I started to have that love in my heart for the things I was doing, for being a mom, being a wife, I just wanted to share my journey. That was really how it started. That's why it's called like the home she builds, because like it's in the process of being built.
Building.
And so
Okay.
literally the whole thing started from just wanting to share my journey, as what I'm learning, what I'm experiencing. And if anybody could relate to that, or if they desire to be in that same position, like, literally we just like grow and experience it together. And just let the Lord like direct us.
And see
And
how
so that was really
it
what my
goes.
vision was. That was the foundational like vision. That
Okay.
was the foundation of, the home she
Okay.
builds. And then it turned into like wanting to start a blog, And then I opened like a whole new Instagram page for it. So really, that was my vision for the home she builds. And I know, like you said, just like you said, I think I have a lot of friends who are in my age group and are living life, and they're single. And so I think for me it was also a way for me to show them, because I know we're all like in the world, like we all had the same ideas about marriage, like, oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
don't want to get married, it's scary, your entire life is over the moment you get
You get
married. And
married, you don't have a kid, yeah.
yeah, it was just, I was then, when like I said, when the Lord started to change the place of my heart, like I was like, I want to share this part of myself with them, and show them that like your life is not over. Like your life is not over like the moment you get married. It has only just begun. Like
Mm-hmm.
when you get married, yes, some things, I do believe that some things do shift and change, and maybe not everything that you've always envisioned for yourself will come to pass, but it doesn't mean it's over. Like the Lord just literally like shifts things, your dreams and your accomplishments. It just becomes a little bit different. It
Yes.
doesn't make it less than. It's just different. So, and that was really the vision for the home she builds.
Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic. It's so beautiful. I love it. I love what I'm hearing. So I think we can just ride on the waves of this conversation where we stopped and just speak more into something that I'll just call it what the purpose of marriage, basically. I mean, women, we in our age and our time, we're in our prime, we're young, we're hip, and we can absolutely find purpose and true meaning being married as a wife and a mother. So I just want us to speak into that a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
than what we just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just put the question this way: how can we, as young women,
Mm-hmm.
who really love the Lord and really love to live the life,
Yeah.
how can we find true purpose and meaning, in our marriages as wives and mothers?
I would say that like the foundation, like first of all, like understanding, having a true understanding that like this is a calling. So like
Yeah.
just the way like just the way a person would feel called to, let's say, be a doctor someday, or be a lawyer, or like be an engineer. Like you think of all those professions and you're like, oh my gosh, that's such a important job, and like I'm gonna make a lot of money and earn a lot of respect in society. I think when you have a true understanding of being a mother and being a wife as a calling from the Lord, and you hold it with even more reverence, more respect, more honor, I think your heart, like you do it with so much joy that like even if I remember there was a question that my husband asked me in our culture phase, and he asked like, if the Lord gave you this assignment and said that like if all you are is a mother and a wife, would you feel fulfilled? Would
Fulfilled.
you be happy? Right. And I remember that was such a deep question for me, because up until that point, all I'd been pursuing was, climbing the corporate
Yeah,
ladder and, achieving
absolutely.
all these things. And I'm like, I never thought about it deeply enough. Like, okay, like what do I envision the family to be for myself? Um, and so, but I think when you start to understand that, like, it is a calling from the Lord, that is one way that, like, when you get into it, like, you just filled with so much joy that you treat it as unto the Lord. So I think that's one of the ways. And then I think another way is when you do become a wife and a mother, um, like understanding that like your purpose is not just in being a wife and a mother. Because I think sometimes you can get lost
Lost, yeah.
in, like, because you don't want to treat it in as an idol either. You don't want it to be where like all you are is, oh, I'm somebody's wife, or I'm somebody's mother, because you are that, and that is very important. But understanding like you're first of all like a daughter of God. So how
Yeah.
can I pour? You're pouring into your home ministry, which is the first ministry,
Yeah, the
but you
first
can also
ministry.
find other ways that you can express the gifts that God has given you, whether even if it's little things like leading Bible studies or leading children's church, or maybe you do have like a career in whatever shape or form it's I don't know, like I think it's different for everybody, but doing it to honor the Lord, doing it as something that that brings you joy as well and fulfillment. So I think when you understand that, like when women have like other outlets, so you're not just
Mm-hmm.
cooped up in the house all the
Yeah.
time, because that's something I had to realize too. It's
Okay.
good and amazing to be a mother and a wife, but there's also other ways that you can serve the Lord, and just get to express yourself. So yeah, I would say
So
that.
beautiful. So beautiful. So I'm just trying to put the conversation in a better perspective, just tying everything all together. So the first one is understanding that, okay, marriage is a calling. And I think that is so profound. I mean, I wish all women, all wives can just take this picture and move and run with it. Because if you know that you are called to be married to this person, same way you're called to be a doctor, or I'm a doctor by the way, so I know how much of intense training you commit into it, and time, and you put all of yourself, your
Exactly.
emotions
Yeah.
into these things to be,
Yes.
to develop your expertise and all of that. So if you realize that you're called to be married, it's, and you're called to God by the way to serve here, and you're doing it as unto the Lord, I
Yeah.
think it's a beautiful way to just begin this conversation for anyone who is intending to get married young. I mean, it's a very good way to just begin and just lay this foundation to know that, okay, as you're getting into this marriage, whoever it is you decide to get married to,
Yeah.
you're called to be in this marriage.
Yeah.
And if you're called to be in this marriage, you have to serve as unto the Lord. So whatever you're doing, you're doing it as unto the Lord, as you're
Yes.
cooking, as you're
Yes.
cleaning, as you're, doing the household chores or whatever it is you're doing, as you're praying, because as unto the Lord. In fact, let me just take it down a little bit here. I think we really need to sit in this point, because if you know that you're doing it as unto the Lord, if you know that it is a calling, there's a part of you that would always want to go back to God, to ask him, what should I do?
Yeah.
What should I
Yes.
bring into this
Yes.
marriage? How best
Yes.
can I serve this man that has been given to me as my
Yes.
spouse? And
That
then
too. Yes.
there are specific instructions that the Lord will be giving to you part time, according to God's own grand purpose for your marriage, God's grand
Yeah.
purpose for your husband, and even his purpose for you as well. So there's a
Yes.
part of you going to God, asking him, what should I do? Receiving specific instructions from God
Yes.
for your
Yes.
own, for your marriage.
Yes.
And if God says, oh, stay in the place of praying for your husband and your children every day, just pray for them because there's something I want to do with them, or there's
Yes.
an assignment they have to do to show up somewhere else, whether on the corporate ladder or in ministry or whatever, so you get instructions from God and you do them. And you can only do them if you see your marriage as a calling, or you're
Yes.
serving as unto the Lord. And
Yeah.
I think that
Absolutely.
point rules out any form of boredom, or any form of seeing marriage as just living the routine, just doing the things, just being flowing, with whatever it is that is coming your way. Just wake up on autopilot, just clean, cook, and do all of those things. So I think that having this mindset would really heal that, and really see marriage as something that can be rewarding and fulfilling.
Yes,
That's
absolutely. I think so. And
that's
I absolutely love your point about like even asking the Lord for specific instructions on how you can best serve your family. Because even like thinking of marriage as, I mean, the Lord, even the Bible says that like, we're called to be helpmates to our husbands. And every
yeah,
husband is different. Every man has a different calling in their
absolutely,
life.
yeah.
So the way I would pray, like, Lord, give me specific instructions on how can I be the best help me to my husband, how can I help him fulfill God's purpose for him on earth? And it would be different from from the calling that
Mine,
the Lord has for you. So
yes.
exactly, so like just praying specifically about your husband and your home is so fundamental. Like I just really loved that point. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. All
Yeah.
right, so moving on. So let's just talk about how this has to do with relating with the older generation, people that are
Mm-hmm.
married. Because I'm so big on the fact that there are a lot of things that older wives, older
Mm-hmm.
moms, know and truly treasure about marriage, parenting, that
Mm-hmm.
we really need to, pick for ourselves as well. We're not discarding everything out. Absolutely, I agree that they were not perfect, or they are not perfect. They had
Mm-hmm.
some of those things. We're still fighting for some human rights,
Yeah.
fundamental things for women, especially in this part of the world where I'm in. So I get it, I get the point. But at the same time, I believe that they have so many things that we need to, really pick lessons from and really
Mm-hmm.
move with. And one of those one of those big things, or big questions, or big issues is
Yeah.
that big submission thing.
Oh,
Like
so,
a lot of us
mm-hmm.
in this time and in this
Yeah.
age, we find it really hard to just take it in. Fine, I agree. I know that the topic of submission, in the previous generation has been battered, bruised, not put in the right perspective, not put in the right, way, not put the same way, God intended submission to be. But I want you to say one or two things about that. Just want us to talk about
About
that.
submission,
Yeah.
right? I think I've never really, I mean, just speaking from my personal
Okay.
experience, I think I will like, if I'm speaking to somebody who's, either freshly married like yourself or somebody who is about to get married, like I think just on a relatable level, like submission is definitely not always the easiest thing to do, because you're basically, in some situations, you're basically having to place somebody else's, like, you know intentions over your own sometimes, because there's going to be a few times where you want to do something, your husband has a different idea, and like it could clash. So I would say, like, sometimes it's big, and the way I think about it, it's kind of like a relationship with the Lord sometimes too, because there in some situations where God is telling you to do one thing and you don't really want to do that thing,
Yeah.
and then there's a clash. So
Mm-hmm.
I think the way we submit unto the Lord, even though whatever God tells you to do, the way we talk about obedience unto God, I think it's kind of the same concept. As wives, we're supposed to submit to our husbands, even though there's going to be some times where you don't exactly want to do that. Um, but I will say that, like, submission is easier when you have a godly husband.
Yes, it
Um,
is. I
it's so
agree.
important.
It's so
It's so
important.
important to
I
have
agree.
a husband, because I feel like even in those moments where maybe you don't necessarily agree, I think that, like, when you have a godly spouse who's not like controlling or trying to assert dominance over you, it helps us as women to trust that if this person is leaning on God, then I can lean on them, because I know that they're following God's instructions.
Yeah.
So submission, naturally, even from the Bible, it's a um thing of obedience to the Lord. Like, you don't just submit unto your husband just because, like, you have to. It's because of God.
Yeah.
So that's the way I think about it. And I think when you have a godly spouse, when you have a godly husband who is understanding, there's room for conversations. You're not I think sometimes one of the reasons why we are headstrong on not like submitting to our husbands is because, like, we think that, oh, they're controlling, or they're not letting you, like, they're not listening to you. But when you have a spouse who, like, listens to the Lord, who follows the instructions of the Lord, who is just like, literally, their heart is to serve the Lord, and they're looking out for your best interest, there's even going to be sometimes, I think, I know this in my personal life. There have been times where, like, I have had a different opinion from my husband, but instead of picking it up with him, I just pick it up with the Lord, because
Yeah.
God, like the Bible says, the heart of a king is in the hands of
Oh God.
of the
Yeah.
maker, his maker. I mean, so there are times where, like, if I just take it to the Lord, and your husband will just come to you and be like, you know what, that thing that we're talking about, I changed my mind. And that's because, like, you've already gone back to the place of prayer. You've gone back to your secret place with the Lord to pray about it, and God has changed his heart. So that way, there's no friction between you and your
Yeah.
spouse. So I don't know. I feel like for me, my personal life, submission has come. There have been hard moments where, like, I've really had to, like, take a step back and pray, like, pray through it. Like, Lord, you know, teach me, like, the right way to approach this conversation or approach this situation. But I think when you have a godly spouse who is submitted unto God first, it's easier to submit, because he's not just making decisions out of his own flesh.
Yes.
So that's usually my answer. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to
Yeah.
add to that, to what you said already, that we are submitted to our spouses. I think somebody already dropped a comment saying husbands are also meant to submit. Absolutely, we are all submitted to God to
Yeah.
begin with. And if we mirror the relationship or the submission that we express to God and mirror it in our marriage with our husbands,
Mm-hmm.
it gives us a better perspective. And this is what I mean. I'm submitted to God, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And since I'm submitted to God, when I get certain instructions from God,
Mm-hmm.
as much as I'm submitted to God, I can speak with God, I can communicate with God, and I can air my opinion, even if it seems like the instruction God is giving me is hard. And then God tries to woo me. God tries to convince me with his word, reassuring me with his promises, and doing all of those things to, get my attention, make me see reasons with him. So that is just the same thing that we can mirror into, put into our marriages. I absolutely believe that submission does not mean that you're a doormat and your husband can just walk on you like, oh, I just want to. Nah, that's not what submission is. Just like we communicate with God. Like when we see things that are not cool, when we receive instructions from God that seems like, oh, this, we ask God questions. I mean, this is the way I have my relationship with God. I communicate with God, I ask God questions, and we interact, we speak. Same thing with our husbands. So, and I think this is quite important, because a lot of Christians just tend to, in an attempt to, really be submissive and go with this submission thing, just tend to now become doormats for, just in case they now eventually end up marrying ungodly men, just end up becoming doormats and just taking all of it in. And no, we are first submitted to God. I mean, and that's like a foundation for everything. We are submitted to God. Our spouses are submitted to God. So as we are submitting to our spouse, we are both submitted to God. And I think this should really help, somebody
No,
who's
I
on
agree.
this.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're like you said, like first and foremost, like we're both submitted under
Yeah.
Christ. We're both submitted to
Yeah.
God. And so like even when you do have like situations where there's a clash, you understand that like we're both gonna take it to prayer. We're both going to seek the Lord's face
Yes. Yes.
concerning this
Yes.
issue.
Concerning
And
this.
like just to buttress like the point about like the Bible talking about, because I see the comment like the Bible talking about husbands submitting to wives as well. I agree. I think in according to the Bible we are submitted to one another, but at the same time
Yes.
God specifically has appointed husbands as the head for a
Good.
reason.
Yeah.
So
Totally.
you cannot drive a plane, or I mean a car, or fly an airplane having two pilots. Like there's a pilot and a co-pilot. Like we both, before God, we're equal in value, but we have different roles. So like yes, the husbands, we are supposed to submit towards one
All
another,
right.
but when it comes to like certain things, when it comes down to it, like one person is going to have to make a choice, make a decision. And that's in that sense, that's when we as wives, sometimes there are going to be a few times where you are going to have to take a step back and be like, let the Lord handle this, and I'm going to choose to submit to my husband in this situation. And I think that takes incredible humility on the part of women,
Absolutely. Minute.
because that's why I said that like it's not always easy. Like the call of a Christian woman, a godly woman, it's not always easy
It's not
because you
easy.
can choose you can choose to be headstrong and fight and butt heads. That's fine. If I mean, I'm not saying that's
That's
fine.
not
I'm just
fine.
saying like you can choose that route. Or sometimes the harder choice, which you can feel in your flesh that that's the harder thing to do, is to be submissive in that situation. That's why I said like really this situation can be solved when your husband is submitted to God first, because
Yes. It's a lot
submission can
easier
be a
that
lot
way
harder when it's not a man who's already submitted to
to
Christ.
go. Yeah.
So
That's so beautiful. Thank you. I think we,
yeah.
just before we go on, I just want to mention to everyone who's online with us, we absolutely appreciate your presence here with us in this virtual room today. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments. We'll see them, we'll read them, and we treat these questions. Yeah. So moving on to the next thing, I think you clocked your 24th. You had your 24th birthday recently. You clocked
I
24
did,
recently. Yeah, I
yes.
saw it.
That was like a
And
month ago.
a month ago, So yeah, I was just thinking, you're a wife, you're a mom at 24. I mean, you got married like 22 or 21?
I
How old are
was
you when you got
21.
married?
I was
21.
21. Yeah.
So I just want to know, like, what were the mindsets you took into marriage at that young age? I'm just curious. I want to know. So what were those mindsets and principles you took into marriage at that age that made you know that you're the woman for the job? You're the woman for
Um,
this job.
I think it just boils down to like even what we were just talking about the previous topic. I think for me, I knew that I was submitted under Christ. And first of all, that was what I trusted that like God was going to take care of me in the details. I remember like before I got married, There were some people that said something like, "Oh, what if you get married and like things change and he changes and all these things like scare tactics, like trying to place it in my heart." But I just remember like choosing to believe that like if God has called me to it, like I said, like then we're gonna stick it through to the end. We're gonna
Yeah.
figure it out. So,
Yeah. Oh
um,
my God.
I was 21 at the time, and I can definitely say that like my mindset, like just the growth mindset from when I was 21 till now, is completely different. Because I will admit, just to be realistic, there were some, traces of immaturity at 21.
At the beginning,
So I'm
we
not
all
gonna
have
lie
it.
about that.
We all have it. We all have it. So it's cool.
Yeah, I'm not gonna, sit here and pretend like I had all the answers figured out at 21 when I got married. But like I said, I knew that like if God had called me to it, then I was just willing to like serve in whatever capacity. And I trusted at the time, like my husband he had shown me in many ways that like he was a godly man, he was gonna be an amazing husband. And if you're gonna procreate with somebody, like I knew that like we definitely need more people like him in the world. So I was
Mm-hmm.
like, if there's anybody that's going to be the father to my children, then I wanted it to be him. So I was like, that was the mindset I had when I was getting married to him.
Okay.
So
Okay. So you had this mindset that was willing to grow. You knew there are some things you had to outgrow. You knew
mm-hmm,
there were some things you had to learn. You
mm-hmm,
knew there were some things you had to drop. And I think that's also another thing. Before I move on to my next question, I think that's
yeah,
also one thing we need to buttress, because I was speaking with my friend the other day, and I told my friend, which she also confirmed, with me, which is that the same way you got married, like the same girl you were when you
mm-hmm.
got married, is not the same girl you are after some
Oh
months. I mean, I'm just
no,
barely 7 months married, and I know how much I've grown.
oh,
To be very
oh
honest,
yes,
you just have to admit that, like, before you get married, there were some things you see as, oh, normal, it's just the normal stuff. But when you
oh
enter
yeah,
into marriage, you have to drop some of them.
oh
You
yes,
have to
absolutely,
shed some of them. And
absolutely,
so, for any young woman out there who is not yet married, we just want you to have that at the back of your mind, that you would outgrow some things.
mm-hmm,
Absolutely. You will
yeah,
definitely shed some excess weight that is not
mm-hmm,
needed for your marriage. There's some mindset that you held on to for so many years that you have to drop just to
mm-hmm.
fulfill the purposes of God in your
Yes, and
own.
you grow in many ways too.
Yes,
Like there's
yeah,
different
absolutely.
areas that you
Aside
grow as well.
marriage, grow in other
Yeah.
ways. Yeah, which is where I'm going to, which was the next thing I was going to talk about.
Yeah.
So I just want us to really also sit into this conversation about marriage on the other, on one hand, and personal development and growth on the other hand.
Mm,
Just balancing
mm-hmm.
the two, not being in one don't be in one extreme hand,
Yeah.
just balancing both sides of the equation. So yeah, what do you have to share
Mm-hmm.
with us, with all these women out there who would
Yeah.
see this later on at the air at the moment? So just share that with us.
Balancing marriage and personal growth. I feel like that's something that the Lord is still teaching me right now. Cause like there's some days that I'm like, I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm doing really well. And then the next day it's like, oh my gosh, like, like I feel like this is chaotic. This is messy. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I think it's usually like in those days, that's really when I hold on to God even more. And I'm just like at the feet of God. I'm like, Lord, I need you to get me through this day because I'm just so stressed. I'm overwhelmed, But I do think that there is a balance. I think, when we look at the Proverbs 31 woman, like
Mm.
she's just the ideal woman. Like she is like, doing like
Girl.
a million things at the same time, and somehow she's able to just balance it all. And that is just an inspiration to me because when it comes to like being realistic, like in the real world, like um in our personal lives, when I say real world, that's what I mean. Like in our personal lives, it can feel very like unachievable because you're like, oh my gosh, how did she do it? Like
Mm.
how did she like
Yes,
how was
how
she
did
able
she
to
do
manage so
it?
many things at the same time? But I do believe that the Bible is a guide, and so if she was able to do it, then we are more than capable of doing it.
Yeah,
I mean,
we have.
Jesus said to his disciples, greater works than these will you do. So I'm a strong believer in like if she did it, I can do it too. And
Absolutely.
so
I'm
yeah, I
agreeing.
think that like for me, when speaking for my personal
Okay.
I don't know if you can hear my toddler in the background.
I can't, but it's fine. It's okay. Do you need
um
a minute?
I know, no, it's okay. No, he's
Okay,
just
okay,
walking around.
okay.
Um, But I was saying that when it comes to my personal life, I think that just being able to balance like marriage and personal development, I think a lot of it has, just besides like the fact that like I know God is taking me through it, because that's the most important thing.
Okay.
I think having a very supportive spouse is also important, because it can be
It
very
is.
challenging to like balance, like, especially when you have such a small child. But I think having a supportive spouse is, really important. And like I said, understanding that like my first ministry is my marriage and is my family.
Absolutely.
So those
Absolutely.
things to me are more important than every other achievement. Like I try my very best to make sure that like, my husband is good, my child is, they have everything that they need, and then we roll in everything else. So I think as a godly woman, understanding that like, your marriage and your family, your children, those things come first. Those have been really good. Like just like things to have in the back of my mind, that like, okay, no matter how much I'm struggling in anything, like understanding that I have to take care of this. Like these things that come first on my list. Like, let me take care of
Yeah.
this, and then I take care of.
Priority and all of that.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, that's the right word. Like, understanding my priorities. And yeah, I think for me that'd be what I would say to that.
Okay. And I also think that it just has to go hand in hand. That's what
Mm-hmm.
it is. And like you said, I think it was the first question I asked or something. The first one we started, we're talking about as much as you see that you were called to be married, as much as you
Mm-hmm.
see that you were called to be a wife, we're also called to be to God to do other things.
Yeah.
So you should not take marriage as an idol or an
Mm-hmm.
excuse, to do the
Mm-hmm.
other things that you've been called to do. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think this is just what balances the whole
Yeah.
conversation and the whole equation, knowing that
Mm-hmm.
as much as marriage is my first ministry, my marriage is my priority, and all
Mm-hmm.
of that, I'm still called by God to do other
Yeah.
things, and I'm
Yes. Yes.
following the Lord to do these other
Yeah.
things as well. So yeah, I think that's just to put it in proper perspective. And absolutely, we are getting this thing. You started with the fact that you're still growing in that area, so it's
All
something
right.
that season as the season changes, you're
Oh.
also picking up new things. I mean, you have a toddler at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely gonna have another baby if you want. So
By
they're
God's
like two
grace.
kids. Yeah, so before you know it, you have a really big family, and
Yeah.
the demand is getting bigger, and it's getting more
Mm-hmm.
demanding, as season changes. So by the time things begin to move really fast, we
Mm-hmm.
need to pick up more things, more wisdom, more
Oh yeah.
strategy,
Oh yeah.
alignment with God.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and I think that's just the beauty of being a Christian woman, because
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
season that you're in, you know that you have the help of God,
Yeah.
you have the help of Holy Spirit, you are
Yeah.
empowered, and that's just so
Yeah.
beautiful.
I mean, that's such a good point too. Like, understanding seasons is a really big
Yeah,
one too,
understanding
because
seasons.
being realistic, there are going to be times where you're not able to do everything. You
Absolutely.
can't realistically, you can't do everything. If you've just had a baby,
I
you're not
mean,
able to like balance like just freshly having a baby and like, like working, or going to school or something. Understanding that, okay, maybe like it's time to put one thing down and focus on one
yeah,
thing. Or and then when your child grows up, I'm just using this as an example, but when your child grows up, a little bit more, like understanding that, okay, maybe now I
yeah,
can
you have
add one more thing to my
more
plate.
free
So
time to
just
do.
don't be overwhelmed. You don't have to do everything in one go.
You
Like I
have
feel
a
like sometimes,
lifetime.
yeah, sometimes we're on this like, unknown timer, like this just clock, like, oh, I have to do this by, I have to be 21 when I do this, 22, 23, like, and we're counting this clock, but just understanding that, like, we're on God's time, so you don't have
God's
to do
time.
everything in one go. So yeah.
I think that brings peace, that brings harmony, and it's really something that I think every woman should
Hmm.
hold on to, knowing that there are seasons, in
Yeah.
your life, and this season come with their own different demands, and you just have to go with the flow, no
Hmm.
pressure whatsoever. You just have
Hmm.
to move with the flow and just
Yeah.
enjoy God. I mean, I think this
Yeah.
journey of marriage for a Christian woman should be one of just simply leaning into God and enjoying God all the
Mm-hmm.
way, just through the different detours and seasons and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Just enjoy God all through.
Yeah.
So that's what I think it is, and I agree
Yeah.
with you on that.
No, I
Yeah, I agree
agree.
with
I
you.
agree. I agree with that. I mean, some days, sometimes you're gonna go through trials. There's gonna be days where things are tough.
Challenges.
Things
Yeah,
are, but I think that's why there's a difference between having joy, the joy of the Lord, and happiness. Because happiness and sadness, those are very fleeting feelings. So, but when you have that innate feeling of joy in your heart, like no matter what you're going through, no matter what's going on in your life, you have that joy in your heart because God is going to take you through it.
yeah.
And so some moments you're gonna struggle, like it's gonna be hard
Mm,
moments, but just understanding that, like, even through the trials and tribulations, even through the shadow of darkness, like He's with me.
it's
So
with you. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely beautiful. Okay, good. I just want to take this moment to give you the floor to talk about biblical womanhood. I mean, I think when I saw that in your
Mm-hmm.
bio, I was caught like, this is beautiful. So there's a perspective to being a woman that is
Mm-hmm.
biblical. There's another perspective to being a woman that is, what do I call it, cultural? Should I say cultural, or
Yes.
societal, or whatever it is out
Mm-hmm.
there that is
Mm-hmm.
not godly? So I just
Yeah.
want you to talk about that for about 2 minutes or three.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think for me, like biblical womanhood stems from like just looking at many of the amazing examples of the Bible. I mean, there's so many amazing women in the Bible. There's Deborah, there's Esther, there's Ruth, and I think that's those are the people. When I think about biblical womanhood, and I
Okay.
think about the humility, the strength in them, um, it reminds me of like who I'm supposed to be as a woman of God. Um, and even thinking about the Proverbs 31 woman as well, she's also an amazing example of biblical womanhood. In fact, maybe if not the ideal, the
Yes,
ideal
like the ideal
description of this.
picture.
I mean, yeah, she's like a perfect picture of it. And so I think when I was talking about on my bio, I think you were saying something about my bio.
Yeah, yeah, say from about.
One of the scriptures that inspires me a lot is about how a wise woman builds her home. Do we like a wise man? It says a wise man in the Bible, but a wise woman builds her home on solid ground, and a foolish woman, she tears it down with her own hands. And so I think for me, when I think about marriage and biblical womanhood and who I want to be as a woman of God, I think about somebody who is trusting God through everything, is just like, Lord, I know you're gonna get me through this. Just God, like, as the center, as the foundation of everything in my home, my husband, coming to my husband, my children, myself, into the hands of the Lord. um and yeah, I think for me, knowing that, like, there's so many ways that, like, my life is going to impact other people all around me, like not just even my marriage, like the fact that, like, I'm able to just influence other people. And when I think about the Proverbs 31 woman, she like took care of people in her household who were not
Yeah,
necessarily
absolutely.
only her
Yeah.
children and her husband. um and that's the life that I want for myself, and I pray for every other woman of God out there, understanding that, just the way you position yourself in humility towards your family, towards your husband, your children, and even those around you, is already a ministry on its own. Like, sometimes I feel like marriage is one of those things where you don't even need to physically, like, you don't need to like speak, before you're
Okay.
able to minister. People can just look at your life and how you live your life and how you honor God through your home.
Yeah.
That, like, that in itself is already a ministry. We think about the way scripture says that, for husbands to honor their wives as how Christ loved the church.
Love the church.
So
Yeah.
already marriage is a description of Jesus's relationship with us as the church.
Absolutely, I
So
agree.
so it's just like,
Yeah.
when people see your life, when people see, not just, and I'm not just talking about myself, I'm talking about my husband as well. I'm sure this is his perspective as well, because we hold the same values. But both of us, like, in marriage, in communion with one another, is a perfect example of Christ's relationship with us here on earth.
Yeah.
So, people looking at your marriage, looking at your relationship, like I said, and not to like sound like I'm saying the same thing over and over, but it's a ministry on its own,
It
and people can
is.
look at that and their lives are blessed. So yeah, that's what I would say. I don't know if that was two
Yeah.
minutes long, but
I wasn't so serious about the time. It was just just to give you an idea of how much. Oh my God. Um, I know it's gonna be like we're repeating what we said earlier on, but I think it's really something I'm leaving this conversation with, which is that marriage is a ministry. When we begin to see marriage as a ministry, I think it makes us take it a lot more seriously. It makes us really want to please God with our marriages.
Yeah.
Because you just mentioned something, that I've always known, but it just came up again now, that the way the way we handle our marriage and the way we do things in our marriage is supposed to be like a picture of the relationship of Christ and the church.
Yes.
And that speaks a lot. That speaks
Yeah.
a lot. So for somebody who's not born again, for someone who's out there in the world, by seeing our marriages, by seeing the way things are done in our marriages, they can have an idea of how it is to be in a relationship with God. And they can either be drawn to God or be drawn away from God. And I feel like that is a very big responsibility on us. I mean, it's very huge. It should make us take marriage a lot more sacred and a lot more seriously. And I mean, that's one thing I'm leaving this conversation with. Thank you so much.
I mean, even in our
reiterating
personal
that.
life, like I've always said that, like we are the first Bible that anybody in the world is gonna read. So like you're, as a Christian, like you personally, like you're a walking Bible. Like you're a walking example of what Christ should be, of what Christ is. And so like now, like taking that into the context of marriage, where it's like even more magnified, even that's your marriage is supposed to be like the way I think about it, like just the way Christ says that your husband is supposed to love you enough to even be able to, because Christ went all the way to the cross for us. So like husbands even have, in my opinion, I think they even have a higher calling, because like they're supposed to be able to
absolutely
die.
they do.
Like, Christ did not call me to die.
I get that.
So I think husbands have it like an even higher calling,
than
because like they're
wives.
supposed to love you enough to die for you, meaning that they're supposed to love you more than they even love themselves. And I think a godly husband, the right husband, is somebody that is going to work towards that. And that's why it brings us back to even the question of submission. Like submission is much easier when you have a husband like that. So yeah, I don't.
That's so good. Thank you so much. Just beginning to tie this conversation together and round up. I'm just going to mention this again to everyone who's online with us. Thank you. If you have a question, please drop it in the comments so we can do that before we leave. I'm so sure and certain that Bumi is ready to take the questions. Are you not?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So
I'd love to.
that's so good. So let's just talk about maybe some principles, about the young modern day woman, or some principles about life generally, or not just marriage, but marriage inclusive, life generally, that you live by.
Okay.
Just share with us. Just share a couple of them
Some
with us.
principles that I live by personally. Surround yourself with people of the same values, godly people. It's so important to have the right people around you. I'm very like specific, because I feel like, just like knowing myself, I'm very like bubbly. I just love people. I'm like, everybody's welcome to my home. But at the same time, I'm very like I'm very specific about like who gets into my inner circle. So, and I think that's very important, because like the things that you watch online, the things that people say to you unknowingly, like it has a certain level of influence on your mindset and how you respond to things. So so I can be very like, I think it's so important as a woman of God to have that, like have like a very purposeful circle, like intentional circle. And so like also like having like people, like mentors, having like the right people that you look up to, godly women. Like the Bible talks about, the Bible tells us that the older women are to lead the younger women and show them what it means to be.
That's one of the passages
marriage.
I run with. that's one of the scriptures I run with
Yeah.
by Ambiyila.
Oh, that's
Good, thank you.
awesome. It's so important. I mean,
It
anything that the Bible
is.
says,
I
of
wish we
course,
could
like.
have that more, where these older women are really creating an environment where they
Mhm.
are these younger women are mentored directly or
Yeah.
indirectly. I honestly wish we can have a lot of them. But I'm too
Yes. I
young to
mean, I feel like
start
that's
that.
something that even in our churches, like that's something that we need to,
Yeah,
I guess like we
incorporate in
need
our
to start
churches.
incorporating a lot
Yeah,
more because like our
absolutely.
churches, I don't know that they are very intentional about that.
I've not seen
So
any.
that's something I would desire, even in my church too.
Yeah,
But yeah, just like having like older women who are more experienced. I tend to find that like in my personal life, most of the older women that I don't necessarily maybe get like direct advice from, but like I watch them
exactly.
online, like they're like
So it
so
doesn't have to be
amazing.
direct
So
mentoring or
yes.
anything. It can be
Mm-hmm.
virtual, it can be online. Just
Mm-hmm.
have that platform or that community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, it's so important. So
it is.
important. Yeah. Those are some principles that I would say like that I live by as a young person who just is living for God and wants to be the vessel. However the Lord wants me to live my life. I try to make sure that I'm also make sure that I read my word and I'm praying about everything. Discernment is such a big thing, especially when you start having kids and you're not just having to take care of yourself, and like you're also like God has entrusted like another life into your hands. That's so important to pray for discernment and be in that place of communion with God all the time, because I think sometimes in our personal lives we can tend to stray away. Like sometimes when you get too comfortable in life, you're not praying as much, you're not studying your word as much, which is understandable. Life happens.
Yeah.
But when you start getting into that place where your spirit is so in tune with God that like you feel an itch, like something doesn't feel right. So yeah, I would say like just being in constant communion with God is like is really important. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, to share mine, I'll tell one principle I run with, which is very dear to me, like the foundation of everything,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, everything is fostering my relationship with God, nurturing my
Mm-hmm.
relationship
Yeah.
with God, getting better at it every day. For me, I feel like that's like the foundation of everything that I
Oh yeah.
am, that I do,
Mm-hmm.
that I everything, absolutely everything. It's even my place of growth because it's in my relationship with God that I am, tender-hearted.
Mm-hmm.
I'm receptive to God when He corrects me. When He disciplines me, I'm able to accept it and then move on
Yeah.
from there. Whatever decision I have to make, it's from there. So
Yeah.
that's all of my principles in one.
No,
So
I
that's it
mean
for me.
that's the
Yeah.
main thing. So I mean
Yeah.
everything
So
else is seasoning. Like that's my husband's quote. Like, the
mhm.
main thing is the word. The word of God is the main dish,
Word,
and everything
yeah.
else is like seasoning.
Sizzling,
It's all like,
sizzling on it. Yeah, absolutely. So
so
that's one thing that
mhm,
I
I agree.
that's my principle, one major principle for me. Oh
Yeah.
my God, it's been such a beautiful time. I just peeped at the time now and I can't believe we spent almost 1 hour. It feels like
I
15
know.
minutes. It honestly feels like 15 minutes and I
I
just checked, oh
know.
my God, we almost went out.
I
So, I mean,
know.
this has been so beautiful. I had such a rich conversation with you, Bumi. Thank you so
Thank
much for being here.
you. Absolutely. We should do
Thank
it
you.
again.
We should.
Absolutely.
Honey, we should.
Yeah.
We should. All right. I'll be looking out for questions in the comments. I've not seen any yet, so
Mhm.
I want to believe there are no questions at the moment or at all, because we'll be rounding up soon. And this call will be ending soon, so I want to believe there are no questions. Anybody, no questions? All right. So I guess there are no
Yeah.
questions. Okay. So yeah, is there anything else you want to share?
No, no, I don't have anything else to share. It was such a pleasure to be able to be here today. I'm not usually on live a lot at all. But
Okay.
maybe I should. I don't know. And maybe if I am, I'll be able to invite you over to my
All
platform.
right. Problem.
That would be
That's okay.
awesome. Because
That's
I would love
good.
to hear more about Ayambula. And even like what does the word Beulah, like what does that mean?
Okay, it means married. It's an Hebrew word for married,
Oh,
actually. So
that's
it's like
sweet.
saying I am
Love
married.
okay,
Yeah,
okay. Because I
that's
was
it.
wondering like where the word Beulah,
Yeah.
um, what
It's
where that
actually a
came from.
passage in the scripture somewhere in the Old Testament. I can't recall the
Yeah,
scripture now. Yeah, so it's
yeah.
somewhere there. Yeah.
I
So
love
it's
that.
like I am
I love
married.
Hebrew
Mm,
names and Hebrew words because
yeah.
my son's first name is Hebrew too.
Oh,
So yeah, so
so good.
that's beautiful.
All right.
I
Thank
think there
you.
was one question.
Okay.
Saw somebody mention my name. Oh yeah, Lisa. Hi
Okay.
Lisa.
Okay.
Um,
She's asking
she
a
said,
question
"What
for
is the
you.
best part of being a mom?"
Okay.
Um, I think the best part of being a mom is honestly like the pure innocent smile in their face. Oh my
Oh
gosh,
my
it's so
God.
wonderful. Like when you have like such a small child and they look up to you for everything. Like you're literally their everything. Like you are the one that feeds them, clothes them, um, everything. Like and like you just have this precious child, and that's your child. Because I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you can hold other babies and they're cute, but when it's your baby, it's just like it's so different. It's so
Oh my
pure. It's so
God.
lovely. And knowing that like you're going to be for the most part you have the responsibility of pouring into this child and making this child into who they're going to become in the future. Like
Okay.
a lot of who that child is going to be in the future is based on how you raise
Yeah,
them right now.
absolutely.
So
How you nurtured
it's
it,
such a
nurtured.
beautiful thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
it is.
would say
It
that's the
is.
best part of being a mom.
Mm, so beautiful.
I
So beautiful.
know.
Thank you.
I love it.
I think there's another question.
Oh,
There's another
okay.
question here that says, please, what do you suggest someone who has trust issues in regards to relationship, and this
Mm-hmm.
has affected her view in the area of marriage?
Mm-hmm.
That is she has this fear of marriage failing because I think that question was broken. Okay, because she can't trust men. Okay.
Mm,
Do you want to speak to
yeah.
that?
Oh, okay. So somebody that has trust issues regarding relationships. Now, I'm speaking from this might be more like of a personal opinion. Well, I won't say it's a personal opinion. I mean, even like we can draw scriptures too,
Yeah.
because whenever I speak, I always try to make sure that like it's based on biblical principles. But I don't want it to sound like very like basic and mundane, but it is true. I think when you have trust issues with people, the first thing is like fixing your relationship with God. Like when you trust God, it becomes easier like to trust when he has something specific for you because you're no longer going to be leaning on your own understanding.
Understanding.
So
Yeah.
when he does bring a man for you, because you trust God, because you've been in communion with God and you're hearing him, it becomes easier to trust the person. Um and so like even in um what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought there. Sorry.
Okay. That's it.
But just like that's what I would say. Like just fix knowing that like once I started trusting God, once I started hearing from the Lord, um, once I know the voice of the Lord, and when He's speaking to me, and I know that He's the one that's brought this person into my life, it becomes easier to like trust God because that way God is able to dig into whatever the root of that trust issue is. God is going to be able to dig it out,
Yeah.
and that no longer becomes a barrier between you and finding the spouse that God has for you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, yeah.
I think that's so good. And just to add to what you said, I also believe that you should build your relationship with God the more. And
Mm-hmm.
once you trust God more, you have faith in him more and his good
Yeah,
thoughts and his good plans for your life, then
yeah,
you're in a better position to receive whoever God has for you.
yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I say this a lot. I'm not in a relationship. As much as I'm running a ministry for women, it's not a relationship platform in any way. It is not. So I am just saying this to portray the point that this is more like a foundational thing. So I absolutely recognize that there are different men out there. And
Oh
the
yeah.
person who's asking this question, if you joined us at the beginning, we talked about marrying a godly man. It's very important to marry a godly
Mm-hmm.
man.
Mm-hmm.
So as much as you build your relationship with God, that is how you can, receive or see the godly man that God is bringing to you.
Mm-hmm.
And absolutely, a godly man will be somebody that you can trust.
Oh yeah,
So there is,
absolutely.
yeah. So there is no need to be afraid of marriage at that point. So just build your relationship